So we talked about last time about the body and soul. Okay, we have 2 more sessions. Tonight I want to speak about the journeys of the soul and the body. Okay, whenever the person dies, that's going to be this session. And going the next session, what I'm planning on doing is to sort of go through the intricate makeup of a person, to understand the parts of the psyche, the parts of the soul, how they interact, and try to see if we can understand that. Today's session. So we talked about that the body and soul are combined. We said they're combined in this strange kind of a marriage, okay, where the body pulls one way, the soul pulls another way. Or maybe that's a regular kind of marriage, I don't know. Depends on your marriage. That's a strange kind of marriage the body and soul have. All the married people are laughing, single people are not. I know what that means, but
Depends on their experience.
So now they're pulling in different directions. Now, I explained last time, I also talked about not to confuse what I mentioned, the book, The Tao of Physics, which tries to claim the Jews are viewing the world as the body and soul always being in contrast. I said, no, in a deeper mystical sense, they're all connected. One's called the thick light and the thin light. The body is sort of the coarse light, and the soul is the fine light. And that's because everything in this world has an aspect of body and soul in it, or male-female, you know, what the Eastern people call yin-yang. Everything is created of that, body and soul, okay? And there's many different names for that. So the body and the soul, on the highest level, they're united as one light, but it's always that the soul is the finer light that fills and enlivens the body. But when we come down to this world as we are, the body pulls in one way, has its own desires, and the soul pulls in the other way. And the marriage of body and soul is our daily struggle. Okay, we'll talk about this next week more, how the parts of this. But it's a daily struggle, which is that on one part of us, we kind of feel like we're drawn towards physicality. Okay? And one part of us is drawn towards spirituality. And I said last time that the power of the soul is minimized when there's a combination of body and soul in this world, because otherwise we'd be transformed. If our soul was connected with our body, with all of its brilliance that it has, then how would we not notice the soul? We'd notice the soul completely. It would transform the body, and then there'd be no free will. There'd be no choice in this world, because then we would already just want to always be connected in the spiritual way. So what does God do? He minimizes or lessens the power of the soul. Or, the way I explained last time, it only gives us access to certain parts of our soul. So about the 5 parts, the lower part of our soul we get access to. We have less access to the higher parts of our soul. And as you see a person that's very, very holy and great, one of the things you see them as called hadras panim, the greatness in their face, it's because they really are more connected with parts of their being, with parts of their soul. Now, when it comes time for a person to die, so what happens? What happens to the soul? What happens to the body? Let's understand this. So, first of all, there are 2 ways that a person can die in general, generally speaking. One, the Talmud calls it pulling out a hair from a cup of milk. It's very easy to do, it comes right out. The other way he gives the example is taking a comb and starting to comb a sheep's wool. That doesn't go so well. What does that mean? It means that it depends on how much the soul has now become entrenched in the body and doesn't want to leave it. When a person becomes more and more spiritual, when it comes their time to go, so it's like the soul's kind of easy to leave. It doesn't yell and scream on the way out. Every person, it says, before they die, it says the Shekhinah, the divine presence, comes to them. They see the divine presence. And the soul is now, moved to come out. That happens apparently to everybody. But there's a difference between a person that's living a life righteously and the soul can leave them in that way, and a person who the soul is already sort of tangled up in the body experience. It's a very, very great difference, to the point where the very, very righteous their death is called the mitas neshika. They die from a kiss. A kiss. Okay? The famous story of Moshe, when he brings Aaron up to the mountain to die, and he sees the bed lying there, and Aaron there, and he tells him to put his, spread out his hands and legs, and to close his eyes, and he sees him dying with a kiss of God. And it says that Moshe yearned for that same thing. And that's why the text says, God says to Moshe, you're going to go to the mountain and die like Aaron did, with that type of just the soul leaving and connecting with God. But sometimes it doesn't go as easily. Now, when a person dies, so the body is a body. You see the body there, and the body's now lifeless. What happens to the soul? So the soul begins a journey. Okay? Begins a journey. And really, depending on the person, it's going to depend how much they know the path of that journey. Okay? A person that trained themselves in spiritual things throughout their lives, their soul now knows more the way to go in that journey. Someone who has not trained themselves in spiritual things, it is a harder journey for the soul. Generally speaking, the first 3 days, it says that the soul is going back and forth from the house to where the person is buried. Soul is, and that's why very often you hear stories of people who like say something was happening and during the Shiva. They felt something like, and it really is the first 3 days the most intense, which is why Thomas says the first days are the crying days, and the next 7 days, it's still, the soul can actually be returning to the house and sort of being somehow connected, and that's what people come to me with stories of stuff that they felt, and that could well be. Now the process now, therefore, the soul now has a journey. The first 3 and 7 days are the most where it's back and forth. And that's the 30-day process, which is why, generally speaking, for most relatives, we have the Shiva, the 7 days of mourning, and then we have the 30 days. Now the soul is sort of disconnecting from this world. Generally speaking, or not always, because there are many exceptions depending on the way things were set up and who the person was and how righteous they were. But after a year, very often what happens is the soul will come to its place of where it's supposed to be. And its connection with this world, the person that passed away, the connection with this world is much more limited. They're so, oh, I'm sorry. A dramatic moment. So their soul is going to its place, and therefore it's much more limited right now, their connection to this world. And that's really why the Talmud says that it takes 12 months until a person gets over a loss. Okay? It says 12 months before the person is somewhat forgotten. I don't mean the forgotten in the bad sense, but in the forgotten place the person could go on in life. Okay? If God didn't give us the power of being able to move on, we couldn't move on. People would not be able to move on in situations. They'd be traumatized the rest of their lives. But on the mystical level, why it's happening is because the person is actually now less connected with this world. Their spirit is not really so much here. They've come to their place after that 12-month period. Okay? And therefore the person is now sort of doesn't feel that same connection. Now, there is an aspect that the lowest part of the soul, okay, of the nefesh, does remain connected in that place where the person is buried. And that's when you go to a place of a cemetery, you very often feel something. The lowest part, we talk about the different parts of the soul. And as I explained to you last time, there really is, even though I said to you there are 5 parts. Remember I said to you there's the Yechida. I meant to do it in English, right? The Yechida. There is the Chaya. I said there's the Neshama. And there's the Ruach. And then there's the nefesh, even in the nefesh, even in this, right, this one here, the nefesh, it actually itself breaks up into 5 parts. And onward and onward. So a part of the person's soul, part of their nefesh, stays around and is still connected in this world. That's what the person feels after they go to a cemetery. They feel something. Doesn't mean the person's neshama is where the neshama is, or the soul is where the soul is. But a certain aspect of the nefesh still stays in that area where the person is, and that's why when a person goes to a cemetery, they can feel something very often, because there's something there. Okay? All right. Questions, comments, thoughts on this so far? Yeah.
Is there a difference in the way the person dies? If the person dies a traumatic death, like murder or accident or whatever, does it change the way the soul, because it's released from the body so suddenly?
You know, I don't know. I mean, that's obviously becomes a traumatic situation. So, you know, people, I mean, in Jewish law, a person asks to have their death should be when they die, it should be a smooth situation, because I don't know how it affects in the greater picture, because that's already a question. Well, why did this person have a death like that? What was it coming to do? What was it coming to, you know? But it doesn't say affect the journey of the soul, but it may affect, you know, what's happening in the outside. Yeah. Question.
I could be mistaken, but isn't there a concept correlating to kind of how we die, how we've lived in a way? Like someone who's lived a really good life is more likely to die peacefully versus someone who hasn't, is more likely to have.
That's what he said. That's what he said. That's exactly what I said. That's how I started. I said that there's 2 kinds. It depends on a person, a righteous person. Then when the time comes, God willing, their soul could leave. But I don't want to make blanket statements like that, because then you'll say, hey, this person had a hard death. I'm not saying that. I think generally speaking, that is how the Talmud defines it. And they define it based on how much the soul is entangled in the body, or how much the soul has been acting soul-like, that when it's time to go and it sees the Shekhinah, divine presence, that's able to go after it, as opposed to someone who is more tangled up in.
Juliana, let me hear. You know, my understanding, you know, if someone has a life goes through a lot of suffering in their life, it kind of acts as an atonement during this lifetime for things they may have done wrong.
We talked about that possibility. We talked about that. That's one possibility.
I know that not keeping the Sabbath is one of the worst things that you can do. Do you think someone who's gone through the Holocaust, that suffering might have atoned for them not keeping the Sabbath for the rest of their life?
Listen, I don't want to get into specifics of telling, you know, playing prophet.
Fair enough.
But what the reality is that certainly the sufferings a person goes through are atonements, for sure. I mean, Talmud says, actually, I mean, depending on what a person does wrong, it says certain things a person can just fix up by repenting, certain things needs repentance plus it needs Yom Kippur, certain things repentance plus Yom Kippur, sort of difficult in life, and certain things, the thing might be so severe, it's called Kehilla Hashem, it's just severe desecration of God's name in the world, that it may only be finally fixed up when he dies. That's a possibility too. Yeah.
I'm sure that the near death experience probably fits into the scheme quite nicely. What actually happens in these?
Well, that's what happens. What happens is that the soul, you know, either, you know, I know of a great righteous man who he passed away, but he actually was clinically dead, and he said he got in front of the heavenly court and he said, I'm not done. I got to finish stuff up, and he came back.
Yeah.
You know, so he had this experience. I mean, he was a great sage in Israel, an elderly man, but he understood what that was. So but people misunderstand their experiences, because then when they come back, they translate it into their terms. So if they see a white light, that's true. Maybe that is. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. That's maybe some understanding of seeing. We know that there's an experience of seeing the Shekhinah. Now, it's a difference between a person who dies in a negative way or a positive way, how that affects it. Or the Zohar, it seems to be, from what I understand, is that everyone sees. The question is, the righteous people and the souls leave one way, and the people who are negative, they have a different experience in how they leave that and how they relate to that. Yeah.
What is the purpose?
And by the way, and there's also a teaching that says that when the soul leaves, there's a scream that's given out that's heard from one end of the earth to the other. And it leaves. We don't hear it, but there's a scream. There's certain screams that are heard from one end of the earth to the other. That's one, when the soul actually leaves the body. There also is a teaching that what happens is that the soul sees the angel that taught it all of its Torah, we talked about last week, in the womb. And that's part of the scream, because, oh, I didn't remember everything I had to do, you know. So that's one explanation, yeah.
What's the purpose of the part of the nefesh staying with the body if the body is immobile?
I'll get to that. Good question.
That's a good question.
So the soul itself, when it's not connected to the body, does it still exist within time constraint? Like
No.
when you're talking, because you're saying, oh, it takes a week, or it takes 30 days. or it
Great
takes-
question. So it's a great question. I have to answer that it's not soul time, it's our time. However that works, you're right. It doesn't, when we talk about the time, the way I understand it, my own answer is that that's how Hashem tells us to relate to the time frame. But what the time frame is, or if there is a time frame, what that means, I don't know what that means, because apparently it would not be bound by time and space anymore. But we're still in the world of time and space. So God tells us, in our relative universe, function as 12 months and all of that. Yeah, and we'll see where this plays out now. Now go to the next step. So now, where does the soul go? When it goes, where does it go to? And where does the body go? Let's understand. Okay. The soul now can go to numerous places. Now, these are not physical places, not like going to the bar. You know, it does not, and the soul's like, you know, where shall I go tonight? You know, it doesn't mean that. But what experience does the soul have? Well, how do we understand it? So now we have to understand there really is two different paths here, basically, and they have a lot of details to them of what can happen. Now, if the person lived their lives well, then what happens is the soul goes to a place called Olam HaNeshamas, the world of the souls. Olam HaNeshamas, the world of the souls. Okay? Olam HaNeshamas, the world of the souls. Now, what happens is that's an experience where a person now is able to, here's what it gets. The neshama, the soul, gets back all of its original brilliance that it had before it was put into the body, before the power was diminished. So now the soul is whatever on the highest level, whatever it means. It's a chelko kamal, a divine spark. Whatever that means, this soul, which is the highest entity in creation, that can experience the divine in the greatest way, it's back to that brilliance, but plus the brilliance that it attained by its actions in this world. Because that was the purpose, our first class. That was the purpose of the whole world, was to be put into this world to earn our connection. And now the soul is given all of that brilliance, plus what the person did in this world, and now the soul is able to have the greatest delight of experiencing the divine. And that's why I told you about a few weeks ago. Why in Judaism we don't talk about so much the world to come, you know? We talk that there are places where it's mentioned, but I said to you before, why is it not like, you know, in other religions, there's long discussions, 72 virgins, and this and that, all this long page of discussion. In Judaism, you know, there's a mention of it. There's many reasons. Well, one reason is, I tell you this, I think to me this is the most beautiful reason, is the more you describe it, the less you understand it. Oh, the world to come is so great. It's better than the greatest ice cream in the world. Okay, is the world to come is Baskin-Robbins? What is it? It's like a mega Baskin-Robbins, a Walmart of Baskin-Robbins. It's really big. Whatever I'm going to say, you're going to start imagining it's physical. That's why, it's 72 virgins. Okay, I know what that is. Yeah, okay, I have it there, I have it here. No, So the more you talk about it, the less you understand it. Because now everything in our psyche is tied into the physical world. That's the way we think. And if I give you physical analogies to what this experience is, then you make it physical. Because you only can think physical. You can't think completely abstract. You can't. It doesn't work in your system. So you can't make that, you can't do that. So therefore, Torah gives very, very brief descriptions of it. But the way I would try to explain it to you is, it is the most intense and beautiful experience of God that you could imagine. You're experiencing the infinite. You're connecting to the ultimate. You're experiencing to whatever degree you can. And there's no more pleasure than that. I gave you an analogy, I think I did in the first class, to imagine a moment you felt, a transcendental moment, where you felt like, I don't know if you were at the Western Wall, or if you saw an incredible sunset and you felt, oh, wow. Take that emotion, multiply it times 100. Multiply it times 1,000. Now times 1,000,000. Now 1,000,000,000. Now infinity. And maybe have some inkling of what we're talking about. But I can't put it into you in words. What I'm going to say is it's delicious. What can I say? But that's the moment of experiencing God when the souls go into Olam Neshamas, this state of existence right there. They are now experiencing it in the greatest way. Better than when they were created. Because when they were created, remember I told you, the souls had Nahama de Ksufa, they had bread of shame, that they didn't earn it. Now they earned it, they worked. The souls were in this world doing mitzvot, doing things that are connectors to the spiritual universe. They had what they were created with, plus what they earned on their own, that's now that experience. Question?
I was just, I don't know. I was just commenting on the way that you were saying that the more we talk about it, the less we can understand it. But I don't really agree with that, because I think that spiritual, intelligent people are able to think beyond the physical with not such great difficulty.
It's true, but you got to think.
I mean, it's
something.
using your imagination instead of your experience, but there's
But your imagination is still connected to the physical. It's very hard to think it totally abstractly, where you have nothing. That's not really possible. It's not.
I think we have inklings of
That's
what
right.
it feels like, so we can connect with those inklings.
And that's
like,
what
for
that's what
example,
I'm getting.
you know that moment right before you fall asleep and then you wake up? It actually feels like your soul is leaving your body, and I actually think that sometimes it does leave your body while
We
you're
talked about
sleeping.
last week. We said last time that part of the soul that does leave the body when
Right.
you're sleeping.
So that feeling of lack of physicality and total connectedness with a spiritual realm is something that can be imagined and conceptually understood, is what I'm saying. So we can talk about it.
That's what we're doing.
I'm saying I didn't really like.
Yeah, I'm giving you the concepts, but I'm just saying to you, when people describe the pleasure of what it feels like, what usually happens is people make it more physical. This is the whole state of Kabbalah. I told you in the beginning, the biggest danger in Kabbalah is to take any of the concepts and to make them physical. That's the biggest danger. And that's why when you read the texts in the Kabbalah, they're analogies, they're metaphors, they're prophetic words, but they're not to be, once you start taking them literally and you don't understand what the deeper meaning is, then you may have a problem on your hands. Which is why the Kabbalah is still a secret, even though it's books. Because you could be all around and reading it, but you don't know what it's talking about. You have to get, of course we abstract to a certain degree. I'm just saying that's what, now you could say what you're saying, one commentary says that, the way I explain it now, according to some explanations, is that we generally will misunderstand it. One commentary says that the masses will misunderstand it. Okay, so you like that better.
Yeah.
I think that even for myself, that I think if I would, the sages and the Torah give us analogies. They do. I'm just saying they don't give us all this physical explanation of what the pleasure is like. They say the pleasure is greater than 1 second in the world to come is greater than all the pleasures of this world, all combined from every person that ever existed. The pleasure of the world to come is greater than 1 second. How could that be? The answer is because it's qualitatively a different experience. So yeah, and the reality is that we're talking about souls, talking about things, but I've never seen a soul. I don't know what I would say. Nice to meet you. What do you do? I mean, you want a coffee? You want a beer? I don't know how to relate. So we have a soul, we understand it, but a lot of these things are already things that are outside of our normal realm. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a strategy, and maybe it's a strategy built into our system of mitzvot to remember the world to come. We're faced with a challenge that if I can withstand this challenge.
Sure. That's what they say. They say that you should count the gains of doing the positive thing and the losses of doing the negative thing, and realize that, not only that, I'll tell you something, this is an incredible, Michael asked me about this idea about personal growth, so it's a different line, so it's a Mussar line of how to make ourselves better people, but actually, there was one Mussar rabbi who said, I think it was Simcha Zissel, he said like this, he said the difference between a righteous person and a negative person, what is it? He said the difference is the power of imagination. Why? Because the negative person can't imagine what's going to happen if I do this. I want to do this thing right now, and it's negative. Well, what's the big deal if I do it? What am I really going to create? Am I going to create all these negative spiritual things? Yeah, you are. Is it going to have consequences for me forever? Yeah, it will. So the person who is the negative person can't imagine past what they see right now. But a righteous person imagines, wait a minute, I might not see this right now, but this is going to have an effect, this negative thing. I might even see the effect. The effect might be something in the spiritual realm. It might be lasting me forever. So that yes, for sure, that's a strategy for sure. All right, let's go on one more second. So now, the soul goes to the olam and the shamas, the spiritual world. Now it gets a little bit dicey. What happens if the person did not do so good? Didn't do so well. What happens then?
Well, he doesn't go to the olam and the shamas.
Right. He needs to go to the dry cleaners first. Get a little cleaned up. It was actually a jingle that I wrote when I was in Israel. There was a dry cleaner, and it was called Zohar, and I wrote a little jingle for them. It went like this: Zohar, the Kabbalistic cleaner. Zohar, the Kabbalistic cleaner. Zohar, the Kabbalistic cleaner. Get you as clean as the day you were born. That was my little jingle. I never used it, but I guarantee it. So, so now, what happens if they get cleaned up? So here's the little rub here. That's called the spiritual ramifications that a person can go through to be fixed up. And there are numerous possibilities. The one that you know best is called Gehenna. Gehenna, I don't know, better explanation, term, I guess they call it hell, I don't know, but I don't get into Christian concepts of what that means. They call it purgatory, they have a different, but it's called Gehenna. Gehenna is the concept that a person may need, his soul may need spiritual cleaning because of what he was stuck with. He didn't do certain things. So what happens now? He might not have gotten the lesson in life. He didn't learn the lesson. He was trying to learn the lesson. God sent him, lessons. God gave him difficulties so that he can learn it. But he didn't learn it. So what happens? So the possibility of Gehenna, which is that a person will now go and have a spirit. Now, they talk about a fire. It's not a physical fire, obviously. But whenever the fire is analogous to us, okay, whatever it means in our world, fire, in the spiritual realm is something that parallels fire, which transforms something. And that's why the analogy, which the Christians took from us also, the analogy of the fire in Gehenna. Because it means that the soul of the person may go through some changes. When you cook something, it changes. And if you burn it, it really changes. So the soul may go through different difficulties that are an experience that is to awaken and to fix up the soul whatever they were stuck with. I gave you the example, I think it was before. I think I said it here. I might have. There's a guy named Korach. Did I say it in this class?
No.
There's a guy named Korach. What did I say? I said someplace.
Recently.
I said it recently. What? A Navi class, okay, all right, so it's a different class, I can say. So there's an example of a person who was really, really bad. And he was really, really bad, and he started a rebellion against Moshe in the desert. We're about to read about it coming up in another couple of weeks. So this guy's name was Korach. And Korach was so bad in the end, he tried to mislead the whole people away from God because he was jealous and he wanted the power. And so now he accused Moses, of making up the whole Torah. He made the whole thing up. And he said, we're all spiritual, we make up our own Torahs, you made this whole story up. And now, it says that Korach is still in Gehenna to this day. Korach's got a long stay. Okay, he's a frequent flyer. He has a special room there that he's been in for a while. Now Korach, so it says that what does Korach do? Korach's in Gehenna, and he repeats the same mantra all day. His mantra is Moshe Emes, Moshe is true. V'Taraso Emes, his Torah is true. V'Anu B'Dodim, and we're liars. And he repeats this. Now, if you imagine repeating a mantra every day for a couple thousand years in a pot of boiling something, you might get the idea after a while, right? I got it! Now even Korach, though, will be fixed up eventually. That's why Korach's descendant, okay, he has the great Shmuel comes from Korach. And that's what we say. So if you just know in Jewish history, Shmuel's mother Chana wrote a song, and praising God, and it refers to Korach. She says, "Morich, God brings down, and it brings up, Vayal, He brings up." And that's also what it says here. We say in one of the Psalms, it says, "Tzaddik, Katamar, Yifrach." In the future. The righteous will sprout up like a palm tree. Commentaries say if you take the last letters of the word, Tzaddik, Katamar, Yifrach, it spells Korach. Okay? It spells Korach's name. This verse in Psalms is referring to Korach. That even though Korach's down in this situation, in the end, he will come out. He'll be right. He'll be fixed up. The verse, the righteous will blossom like a palm tree. That's Korach. In the end, he'll be okay too. But that means he has to go through these things. Now, there are many, many particulars in how this works. Just briefly, the Talmud says if someone is exactly equal, then God tilts the scales and he doesn't have to go to Gehenna. Okay? If somebody is not exactly equal, so then he has to go down for a moment. There are some people have to go down for longer. And some people that are so bad, they may have to go down for this concept of 12 months. Which again, I don't know time, but 12 months is a year, a shana in Hebrew, means l'shana to repeat something. It's a cycle. Which is why in conversion we make sure someone runs a cycle, because the Jewish year, the year is a cycle. So it might be a full cycle, which is why in Jewish law we only say Kaddish for somebody for 11 months, not for 12. Why? Because if we say for 12 months, we're implying that the person was so bad, they might need a full schedule, 12-month stay. So, but somebody who's really, really negative will be there for 12 months, and it says that the experience there will change who he is, kind of like analogous to when you have something burning, that it becomes ashes, it becomes something else, and then God will put the person in sort of under the heels of the righteous, means connecting to the spiritual world, just kind of getting in. That's what can happen. It means a person really lived their lives negatively. Then what happens is they could be actually, have to go through a major transformation to get in. And some people, like Korach and others, are so negative it takes a very, very, very long time till they are somehow brought back into the system. That is the process of Gehenna, I don't know a better word for hell, I don't know what to call it. The Hasidic masters say there's two different kinds of Gehenna, two different kinds of hell. One is fire and one is ice. Fire and snow. Why? Because they say, but it's all an analogy. It's an analogy because it's not a physical thing. But it's an analogy to, they say like, because fire, you know, if you lived your life negative because you were hot-blooded and you did all these things, that's one problem. Some people live their life negatively because they're cold-blooded. They don't do anything. You know, and they may need the homeopathic treatment of an icy experience because they were so cold and not motivated to do things that, you know, whatever it is, it's not a physical experience, but it is, does the soul could go through a negative experience there, but for the purpose of fixing it up, that it could get into the system and eventually get into the Om Nishans. Yeah.
What say a soul has done a lot of really, really good things, and brought a lot of positivity into the world, but at the same time, it's done a few really, really, really bad things too.
Right. So again, there's a lot of processes. There's a process of tshuva, of just repenting. The person's alive. That's the best one. Just fix up. As long as you're alive, you can fix it up. As long as your person's alive, they can fix it up. Stories about people in the last moment of their life and they fixed it up. So as long as a person's alive, they can fix it. A person doesn't fix it up, so then there are possibilities. One thing is that God may bring difficulties in them on their life to just clean it up for them. Okay? I'm not saying everyone has to get the spiritual punishment or negative consequence, if you prefer. But that's one system. Another system is fixing it up, tshuva. One system is the person might have difficulty in their lives, which help them to clean up those negative things and leave them whole. And there's a few other systems we're going to get to in a moment. Yeah.
How does suffering clean you up in this world, at least, that we can understand that? How's that a part?
I would say because it's a hard topic, but I would say this because everything in the end, you have to show what's true and right in the world. Right? You have to show what's true right in the world. Now, if you go and you do something that's positive, and there's a positive response, it demonstrates what's right. Something negative gets a negative response, that also shows what's right. That's the analogy I would give you. It's a lot more, it's a lot deeper, but think about that direction. That really the negativity, it's like a homeopathic treatment. It's kind of like you've done negativity. You know, homeopathy is an interesting thing because they treat like with like. And I told you, the classical homeopathy, the people go through all these old, you know, they actually start showing symptoms they had of the disease itself. Now, just a similar idea here is that you know, if you do something, if someone does something negative, then they get a harsh response to it. Either that can wake them up, that can wake others up, or it could actually just be the measure that they need to still demonstrate what's correct in the world. Yeah.
I don't know if this helps answer the question, but if you think about it on the physical level, when you go through a detox, different people can go through the same detox, but depends on how toxic they are. One person might experience real negative consequences due to the detox until they're complete with their detox. You know, get sick, get all kinds of things, but, you know, so I mean, I kind of feel like it would be, I guess, analogous to that.
It is.
It's like, well, when you're spiritually dirty, getting rid of that dirt is a heavier process. You need a heavy cycle as opposed to a little gentle cycle.
That's
you know
right.
what I
That's
mean?
right. And if you want to put it into the logical arena, even when a person gets at a certain level, there's still a certain awakening. You know, when you get that difficult, that detox, in a certain part of him is understanding that there's something wrong. Yeah.
I was like, but if they're getting cleansed, but then again, then you still the concept of reincarnation.
I'm gonna get there. Everything.
Oh.
I'll get to a lot of things. So, yeah.
Can be obliterated like a Hitler.
Yeah. I was thinking
So I'm gonna quote the Ramchal here. The Ramchal says that most people have a way to get in, is the vast majority, except certain people that are the worst of the worst. The way he writes it is that there are a few that will not get in. There's no way to get them in. Someone who's thoroughly evil. Somebody who has, has done good, has not ruined themselves to the point so then they can be transformed because they have this negative experience of sort of burning up, but they can still have something good about them. But someone who was like a Hitler or something.
So what about Aaron's sons who were so?
Oh, they have the greatest spot. They're front row seats. They're front row seats. Their souls left them. It's true. The fire came in and burnt them. And their bodies were intact. But they are considered to be very, very righteous. They're actually considered to be the two. We don't have the two goats today in the service and temple. And one commentary says the two goats are Aaron's sons because they still represent. They were still such righteous people. There's a certain positive energy, even though they made that mistake they made. But they're very, very holy people. Yeah.
I read that confessing your sins to a righteous person before you die fixes up those sins.
It's not confessing to the righteous person, confessing to God. It's just that what we do is, the custom is that somebody will help to lead the person to do it, but it's not nothing to do it as another person. That's that we don't do it. It's confessing to Hashem. The other thing is other people. That's not us. That's another team. Right? Okay, good. So now let's go on. So now, hi Lynette.
Hi.
Good to see you. So now. Now, there are many other possible scenarios. I'm going to tell you one which is kind of freaky. This one's called Kehilla. This is somebody that actually is not even ready to get into Gehenna yet. It's like a pre-Gehenna. The guy is not ready. It's kind of Kehilla, the way it's talked about in the sage, as if the soul is being shot with a slingshot from one end of the earth to the other. It's kind of like a person stuck in suspended animation. They're not able to even get into Gehenna. It's a very frightening situation, and it's very painful. Let me explain how painful it is. This is the way the sages give this analogy that people give. Imagine a person that spends their whole life lifting weights, pumping iron. It's all they can think about. That's all they can think about. Okay, I met people like this. They get up, weights. All they think about their whole lives, nothing else. Now, when they die, what happens? The consciousness they created was lifting weights. So their soul leaves, and the soul says, "Where's the gym? I gotta go iron. What's going on?" Because that's the consciousness they created. Just like if people who drink wine, if you were raised with your parents saying to you, "Here, have some Manischewitz sweet Concord grape. This is the best." You're like, that's not developing a taste for wine. But somebody you started, you learned this and that. People who develop a taste for wine, they know good wine. They develop a taste for it. In your life, what sensitivity do you develop? A spiritual sensitivity? Then your soul knows where to go when it leaves. But if you develop a non-spiritual sensitivity for pumping iron all day, when the soul leaves, the person's consciousness wants to go find a gym to pump iron. But the person knows it's not a body anymore. And therefore it's in the suspended animation called Kehilla, where they're not even able to get fixed up yet because their consciousness is such that the pain of knowing they want to be someplace, but what they developed was something else. It's very painful. That's also called a spiritual negative repercussion that is to fix a person up. By the way, there was one rabbi who said, I forgot who it was, I think it was Brisker Rover. He said he could never do anything wrong. He could never do it. Probably what's wrong? He said he couldn't do anything wrong. Why? Because when he was 6 years older, his father sat him on his knee and he described to him exactly the details of what happens. It's like, well, I know what happens. I can't do anything wrong now. So I'm giving it to him vague because I don't know the details as well as the Brisker Rover. But he explained to his kid that this is the things that happen when a person does negative things. It creates that. So another thing could be Kehilla. A person, before they even get in, they spend animation. Is Gehenna itself. And then, as you said before, sometimes God says, okay, the person maybe not even able to get into Gehenna. Now he's got to give it another shot. Go back, maybe go back into this world, because you're not close enough to get fixed up for whatever the calculations are, that you can just have a Gehenna experience which is going to fix you up, or whatever it's going to be. Whether it's going to be a dip whether it's going to be a dip for 1 second. There's some people get a dip for 1 second. Some people have a longer process to 12 months, people longer. But some people maybe say, okay, you got to go back, because you got to fix up what you did wrong in this world, and then the soul will come back in the Gilgul, and the person will have another shot at fixing up their situation. Now, all of that process, as we talked about in Shmuel, is because that God doesn't want anyone to be lost. So there's many processes that a person can get fixed up. What are the processes we said? The processes in this life to tshuva, difficulties in this world, spiritual problems maybe afterwards, and or coming back into the world of Google. It's all now to be able to get into that experience of the world to come, of experiencing godliness, of being able to be in this state of the Olam Neshama, the spiritual realm, where you're now connecting with God in this type of a way. Questions? Yeah.
A couple questions on it. First of all, coming from the experience of sports, like, I've definitely found spiritual moments in sports, the runner's high, going down the backside of a mountain on my snowboard. Like, you have that moment of just you and God, and like all else just disappears. It's like, what about that sort of physical, like seeing the spiritual through the physical?
Possibly. I'm not going to say no. I told you before, I told you in another class, we do something in NLP called core transformation. You say to the person, what do you want? And I say, I want more money, I want a better job. Okay, you got it, now what do you want? I want a big house, now you got it, now what do you want? You keep going on, and everyone comes to some way, so let's say, I want love, I want connectedness, I want unity. Those are all different names that you're giving for your experience of God, because you want to feel connected. It may be a small, obviously a small version of it, but any spiritual thing that you're talking about as a transcendental experience is what you're calling really being able to have some experience of the infinite. Think big, connecting to God and experiencing everything, the universe. Think bigger. Think bigger than, snowboard is one, but think bigger, that's, so if you have that experience where something transcendental, then maybe it's a reflection of a spiritual moment, yeah.
Alright, and with Gilguls, I actually think it was you who mentioned most souls become as an Israelite, a Levi, and a Cohen. Was that you who said that?
Yeah, I said that. That reason says that.
But also, is there any particular order that this happens? No particular order?
I mean, I'm sure there is an order. I don't know of any particular order.
But
there's a teaching that comes back. A person comes back as a Kohen Levi in Israel. Yeah.
And in a case of a person who has to come back, what if it's not because of what they did wrong, but that they just have more to do?
So that could be. That could be also. I don't want to get too much into Googling because that maybe is part 2 of the midnight class, but there's another way that it could happen, that a person could actually do something while they're still alive and not coming back into the world, where they could fix up sort of things that they missed. There's something called an Ibur, I don't get into right now, but yeah.
I don't know if this is still coming in your talk, but so reincarnation, does that happen to all the souls, or only the ones that have to go back because they have to correct?
Not necessarily all souls, no.
So you can be a good soul and still come back. It's not just the bad ones that get sent back.
Oh, that's what he said. If a person has fixed everything they have to fix up, they won't come back as a Gilgul. No. If somebody has, it's not. I don't know the likelihood of that. It doesn't. It sounds like a lot of people. It sounds like most people.
So it's until you're fully corrected.
Yeah.
It's like self-actualization.
Yeah, right.
You're
Now
done.
there is something called Ibur. I don't want to get to now, but a person could actually might not come back into this world. Really freaky.
Can they come into another world?
I gotta say something I don't say. So, but there's another possibility where a person didn't fix it up, can actually do something in this world without actually fully coming back into this world. But generally speaking, a person's completed all their mission. They won't come back as a Gilgul. But sometimes if a person's completed something, they may be able to assist someone else doing something in this world. Let's leave it like that. Yeah, I gotta go on, 'cause I'm never gonna make it to the end here. So now we got the ultimate of Shabbos. We're really in the soul world right now. The soul world. Now, so we have, what have we seen? We've seen so far that the soul leaves, and it hopefully goes to the soul world. That's sometimes called Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. That's weird. Garden of Eden, that's really weird. There's an iron butterfly here. That's you, Cliff.
Yes.
What the heck is it? What do you mean, go to the Garden of Eden? So there's two Gardens of Eden. There's a Garden of Eden in the physical world, called Gan Eden Tachta, and Gan Eden in the upper Gan Eden. The upper Garden of Eden is a soul world. There is a physical place in this world called Gan Eden, but they parallel each other. And there's a spiritual, that's why when you say in the prayer, sometimes their souls should be in Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. It's a very, very funny image. You see the souls, picking apple trees. It's weird. What does that mean? That means the spiritual Gan Eden.
Apples, Rabbi, not apples.
I didn't mean the truth, not lying. Like apples. Yeah, right, you guys say that. So there's a spiritual Gan Eden, which is called the soul world. There's a physical Garden of Eden also, which parallels this, called the upper and lower one. Okay, so the person's soul leaves. The soul now may go through its purification. It may get into the soul, may go directly to the soul world. So now we have a very nice scenario. We got the souls there, and they are connecting. They have this incredible experience, and they're just feeling godliness, and they're understanding, and they're tuned in, and everything is fantastic. Greatest joy in the world. One problem, though. There was a partner in this marriage that's sitting in a grave. The body. What about the body? That's not fair. That's not fair. The soul should have all this pleasure and the body doesn't? That doesn't make it, that's very difficult. And this is a very important concept I'm about to tell you right now. It is a fundamental Jewish concept. I don't always talk about it because people can't imagine it because we're used to what we see in our little world. But logic dictates from Jewish thinking and from what's right in the world that it is completely inconceivable that the body should have no experience now when the body was the vehicle through which the soul was able to do all the good things it did. That's completely and utterly unfair. That can't be. That can't be. And this is going to bring us to a concept called Tchias HaMesim. And we got to hold on here, make sure we do this right. Tchias HaMesim is translated as resurrection of the dead. Now we need to understand this because when I say this, our American minds start imagining, the Christian version of Night of the Living Dead. We got weird ideas of what this means. But we got to understand this because this is a crucial concept, and I explain to you why it has to be true. It cannot be the body is lying in the grave when the soul is getting all its pleasure, or the body was the vehicle. Without it, it wouldn't have done it. It's not possible. Let's understand. First of all, why is the concept of body and soul reuniting so foreign to us? It kind of, really? Can't be. What? Why? Why like that? The answer is very simple. Because we've never seen it. Because you've never seen it. It's something that doesn't, you could imagine, okay, the soul leaves. You see the soul leaving, you see a person die and go someplace, okay. But you can't imagine the idea of a body and soul combined. You've never seen it in your life. But the answer is that you have seen it. You've seen it many times, really. You've seen it many times. Here's one example where you've seen it. You take a seed, okay, you put it into the ground, okay, then at a certain point the seed starts to decay in the earth. And then it sprouts out a tree or flower. Now, you are amazed. Wow, how did that happen? But you do it again and again and again. And at a certain point, you're not amazed. That's the way it is. Now, another time, a person goes, he dies, puts him in the body, puts the body in the ground. You turn around, and the guy sprouts out, comes back. Woo. Now what do you say? That can't be. But really, if you think about it, conceptually, it's not any different from the reality of putting a seed in the ground, which actually does decay before it sprouts. And that we're used to, that we can accept, that we can believe. But the idea of a person that was living, where the body was actually connected to the soul at some point, being put into the ground and then coming back to life, that's completely unimaginable to us, because we've never seen it. But it's not any stranger than planting a seed, and it's really not any stranger than taking a sperm cell, combining it with an egg, and then a person comes to be also. Why should that be? You know why? Because that's what our lives see, and we can accept what we see. What we've never seen is unfathomable to us. But you see an example of it as planting a seed, a child being born. The Talmud even says it's more logical. If the child was never born and the sperm and the egg combined to create a child, how much more so a person that was already a living being? He should be able to come back to life. Why do you assume one is more logical than the other? You think it's more logical because you see that people, have relations and a child's born. But it's not more logical, just what you see. And therefore, there is a concept of tchias amesim, that there's a certain point where the body and soul are combined. Now, I'm going to tell you the way approach of the Kabbalists. There's a bit of a disagreement with Maimonides here on how this works. If you want to explain to you in detail why I think that this is really not an argument. But I'm going to tell you the approach of the Kabbalists, which is the Ramchal, Nachmanides. It's a little different than Maimonides. Maimonides' version of what happens, but I believe in the end there's really not much of an argument. But the way the Kabbalists understand it is as follows. They understand that this soul world is not the ultimate state of existence. That's not what people call heaven. It's not the ultimate state. That's not the world to come. We call Olam Haba. That's not it. This is kind of a way station. This is a place where it's tremendous joy and experience of God, but that's not the final situation. The final situation, the sages understand, is when the body is actually reformed and the soul and body is combined. Now, here's the catch on it. I explained to you before, when we started this whole session, I said, when the soul originally is put in the body, its brilliance is diminished. And I told you that Moshe had a different situation, where his soul was allowed to shine forth with more of his brilliance. As opposed to us, which we only get the nefesh, maybe the ruach, we can feel the higher neshama a little bit. Moshe had it inside of him. He had the neshama inside of him. He even had, if I remember correctly, he had even the chai inside, if I remember correctly. So Moshe now, because his body and soul have a different relationship, he doesn't need to eat. He can eat. He's got a mouth. He doesn't need to eat because his soul is brilliant, and that's why it says in the text, his face was beaming light. I mean, imagine that. Moshe was the masked man. Moshe wore a mask because they couldn't look at the brilliance coming out of his face. What was that because of?
Dark.
What?
So you learn in the dark.
Yeah, you learn in the dark too, that's right. So why was that? Because his soul was that powerful in the combination of body and soul. He didn't need to eat, because it makes no sense. If your soul's so strong, then your soul's so dependent that if you don't eat, you can't function. By the way, and this is why it's important to take care of your bodies, the sages say that if you don't take care of your body, that the soul-body combination is hampered. It's hampered. And that's why people learn that the only way to really serve God fully is when you take care of your body, because the body-soul connection now is lined up. Is lined up. So Moshe has his body-soul connection in such a way that he's not dependent on eating. His soul is powerful. Imagine now the relationship going further. Go higher. Not only Moshe's level, go to another level where the soul is so brilliant that in the highest level, the body is now completely subsumed and completely, it's some kind of shell of sorts to the soul. And as a matter of fact, just imagine an opposite of the world you live in today. The world you live in today is the body is, you feel the body, the soul you barely feel. Imagine the opposite now, where the soul has all of its brilliance, and the body is now an extension, an appendage of the soul. That is the ultimate experience of the world to come. When the body and soul are combined, the body, which is in the kever, in the grave, is reformed in a different and superior way, and the soul, with all of its brilliance that it's gotten from its deeds, from its experience in the soul world, is combined now. It's combined in a completely new way. It's a new relationship, body and soul. And the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim talks about levels. It kind of moves up in levels till the highest level of the relationship of body and soul. And the highest level, the soul is completely in its brilliance, and the body is now just the appendage of the soul. So that's the experience of the world to come. The world to come then is the experience where a person can now experience the divine completely, and this body, it won't look the same, of course, this body is now transformed where it's a part of the soul. And that means everything's been fixed up. It's not that the body's sitting there in the grave and the soul. No, everything's been fixed up. The physical world's been transformed. Your own physicality has been transformed. And it all becomes soul, all becomes spirituality, connecting to God. Yeah.
I imagine like it might be more pleasurable to be able to be a total soul and fly around everywhere I wanted to. Isn't the body something that limits me, and why is
No. Because I said to you, when the body is on that level, it's not limiting at all. I told you before, everything has body and soul. Everything has male, female. Everything has that. So even on that level of soul, there is an aspect of soul that's imbuing and receiving. It's just now, for the analogy I gave you in the beginning, it's like, imagine light. One is fine light, refined light, and one is thicker light, and they're together. The body won't impinge the soul at all at that point. It'll just be part of what the person is. Do you have a question on that?
Okay, thank you.
So, as you said, if we don't take care of our body, it can affect our soul.
Yeah.
What if we don't take care of our soul? Would it then, in turn, affect our body negatively?
If you don't take care of your soul, then what happens is that you become a person becomes a living dead person. That's what I didn't say. It's what the sages say. A person taking care of their soul, the aspects of their soul leave them, and their body is functioning, but it doesn't have the spiritual life the body is supposed to have. It's not fully connected. The guy's a robot. And you see this sometimes with people. I mean, sometimes you see even athletes. Sometimes you watch them, like, my son like watching basketball, at the playoffs now. Every single guy scores like, I was like, whoa. What part of that is you? Is that the soul speaking? So a person who doesn't take care of their soul, they'll still have a body, but the body is only, this we'll talk about next week, they're going to have a life force that's going to keep them alive, but it's not a life force that's any longer connected back to the source, back to God. It's connected. It's not going to have a life force now that's going to be called the Neshama Yona. So that's our class next week. Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
Well, this is obviously why Jewish people don't believe in cremation. But what about all the people who burned in the Holocaust?
So that's not a problem because God restructures the body. How he restructures the body? How does he restructure it from the earth? I mean, it's not a tree. It's not just growing out. So whatever it means, but there is, and this we'll talk about this next week when we talk about the different elements and what that means. But somehow there's a certain element of earth that is somehow central to what we are, and the body returns to the earth. As opposed to fire, it's a different element, and that's what's kind of returning to ash. Now, God can reconstruct it from anything.
So if God can reconstruct the people who burned in the Holocaust, so why can't I choose cremation as a green choice for myself?
You got all that extra work.
That we'll have to see for next week when we talk about a little bit what the if we can understand this, then the next was a little bit hard with this. I try to understand this, to understand what it means, why it's important that we connect back to the earth. A certain element, I hope we'll be able to understand it ourselves. But that's what that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to, when we have no choice, then we have no choice. But that was the time to talk. We talked about that was the first time we met. That was the first conversation we had.
It's coming back around.
It's coming back around. Yeah.
I think a couple of weeks ago you spoke about the concept that there are 600,000 Jewish souls
Yeah.
in the world, and how does that connect to what we've been talking about?
So what that means is that when a person enters into the soul world, so every soul is now part of a greater soul, and those 600,000 souls are really one greater soul. So that's the experience now. You're part of a team,
Like a soulmate.
What? Soulmates is another thing. Soulmates is one soul. It's the male, female of one soul. But when the souls connect into the greater soul, that means that they're part of a greater unit. And that greater unit, we call it Knesset Israel, we call it the Congregation of Israel. That's the entire Jewish soul situation that's connected to God. But there, apparently, I would like to understand, I believe this is correct, is that we still have individual consciousness. It's a very important point. I think that in Buddhism, the concept is to get to a place of oneness where there is no personal consciousness. I believe our version is different. Our version is, like everything, we're very complicated. It's the oneness and it's still the individual. There's it's the analogy of a candle that goes into a large flame. And now it's part of the large flame. We've connected back to God. We're experiencing the infinite. But still, we're a candle still. We can be able to thereby get the pleasure and experience of our own consciousness. We're not lost. It's a paradox. It's a beautiful paradox. But I think the other paradox, I think the other version is kind of frightening to me. Like, be one with the world, so now I'm a chair, and I'm a frog, and I don't know what I am anymore. I like the idea, the concept that, yes, in a certain way I'm one, and I'm a flame in the fire connected back, but I still am me. Whatever me is. Now I'm a much bigger me, but I'm still me. But I'm me and I'm not me. It's both.
So the human personality actually affects the soul personality. Like our human...
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
expression.
Yeah.
Like who we are, our sense of humor, our kindness, our strength, our whatever we do. It affects, and our soul takes on a personality. Is that
A little different. It's that in the lower world of who we are, there's a representation of what we do. So the challenges you have in life are unique to what is the root of your soul. But when you look up in there, in that higher level, you're not going to see your soul laughing. But when it comes down to this world, who you are, who your body and soul are, then there's certain unique qualities that you have. But one of the hardest parts in life, and this is probably next week's class a little bit, is to bring out the real you. Because half the time you don't know who the real you is, because if you have your unique way of seeing the world, but you've been biased because of television and commercials and society of this and that, so then the struggle people feel in their lives is because they want to feel, it's really me. And when you feel a moment, you're like, oh, that's who I am, you feel great. But so many times there's layers, and this we'll get to hopefully next week, there's layers of things that block that. That's what we got to clear away to be able to touch the essence of who we are, and then that's joy. It brings joy. All right, thank you everybody. Very good.